Tim Scott, welcome to the program. How are you?
Ben, I'm doing really well. I hope you're doing fantastic.
I am doing great. I'm doing great. Tell me about One Nation, Always Under God.
It is a story. The way I look at it is if we're going to understand our future, we must have a great foundation in our past. And America's foundation was a Judeo-Christian ethos. And through the book, One Nation, Always Under God, I speak a lot about these amazing Christians who dedicated their lives to being extraordinary, not because of who they are, but because of whose they are. In God's hands, we can do the most remarkable things.
So there's a couple of books out that are, one of them is coming out. Yours is out now. One Nation, Always Under God. That is explaining this, I think, in the best way possible. Because when a country loses its story, it loses. You can't sustain it anymore. And these are the stories where American Christians stepped up and needed God and moved our nation forward. So let's talk about a couple of the stories. Let's start with William Lloyd Garrison. Who is he? What happened?
You know, Glenn, one of the things that got me in trouble back in 2021 is I said the truth, which is that America is not a racist country. And one of the reasons why we're not a racist country is because we've wrestled with race for so long, we've won. And William Lloyd Garrison was an abolitionist who fought tooth and nail against racism and slavery. And because of his fortitude and his faith in God that he was called as an ordinary person to resist the way that the world was at the time, he achieved a victory for other people. You know, Proverbs 31:8 reminds us to stand up for those who can't stand for themselves. William Lloyd Garrison and millions of Americans have taken that stand. And today we celebrate the achievement of those who went before us. And if we're smart, we'll remember that as we look to our future and celebrate where we are today because of the sacrifices of yesterday.
Apollo 13 astronaut Jim Lovell.
Yeah, what a great story. Jim Lovell was a man of conviction and strong faith. He was lost in space, 200,000 miles away from home, so to speak. Running out of oxygen, he started praying. This peace fell over him, and he understood what he needed to do to save the lives of the astronauts that were with him by conserving oxygen, making some things happen that were nearly impossible. But he was led by his faith and prayer that gave him a peace that allowed him to rely on the expertise he had inside him over years and years as an astronaut. It's a tremendous story of victory, even outside of this world.
Dorothea Dix.
Dorothea Dix is a wonderful story of an amazing Christian who felt called to examine the institutions where those who were suffering from mental health and mental breakdowns were housed. She found their plight to be disgusting and challenging. She felt called by God, an ordinary, everyday woman. She did something extraordinary. She changed the way that the insane asylums of her time were housing everyday Americans. And because of her, we have sanity, we have respect and dignity in so many of the places that today those who are suffering mental health challenges are taken care of. Really an amazing story.
Go ahead, finish up.
It's just really an amazing story of a woman called by God, everyday person, to do something, frankly, groundbreaking around the globe. All started here in America by one woman with a Christian conviction.
So we are, let me get off the book here for a second, but focus on this, what she did. We are now, we have a mental health problem on the streets of our country.
Yes.
It is really bad. And I don't know how to solve it. Tim, there's, the president says, we've got to get these people back into care. And that is absolutely true. But I also remember what the government was like, what those government institutions were like, and what they became. When I was a kid and Reagan stopped them, they were really bad and dangerous. How do we stop this from becoming that again?
Well, that's a great question. And one of the reasons why I wrote about Dorothea Dix is I looked around and saw the plight of everyday Americans today. 100,000 people have lost their lives because of fentanyl and drug overdoses. During COVID, we saw a 30% increase in parents bringing their teenage kids to the ER because of mental health episodes. You're 100% right. We are living in a time of great mental instability. The way that we solve this is frankly not by having the government take it over. It is, however, by having programs like the one started by John Baker, who focused on celebrate recovery in church. I believe that the fastest way to solve the problems that we face today is by depending not on the government, but depending on each other. And this program called Celebrate Recovery is in over 40,000 churches around the world. And as a result, we've seen lives restored. We've seen people healed. We've seen families brought back together. The one thing you and I both celebrate is the fact that the government, we don't depend on the government because they don't do things well. And frankly, the actual solutions are closer to home, in your local church, in your local community, in your family. We need the restoration of the family as a bedrock of our society if we're going to solve many of the issues and the ills that we face. That can't happen because of government fiat. It only happens because a person convicted by the Lord turns to God for help. Families restored because fathers and husbands see their rightful place in the family and they find their common sense and return home to their families.
What does it mean, convicted by the Lord?
For me, the conviction, I'll talk about my personal experience. As a kid growing up in poverty, I was lost as a goose in a rainstorm for much of my childhood. I nearly failed out of school because I didn't see a way forward. But Glenn, I'll tell you, I felt this growing need for something, and I had some really good Christian friends who taught me by example more than words that what I was looking for was a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. I felt this conviction, and I want to look at that comparatively speaking to condemnation. So often people that condemn you are looking out for your best interest, but you do need to have this conviction in your own heart that there is a better way. And that conviction for me led me to examine Christianity, and I came to the saving conclusion, my life is better off in his hands. And so when I talk about that conviction, I'm really talking about this understanding that something must change and it must start in me, not somewhere else.
You know, it is, to me, it is the definition of evil. What we're seeing happen in our country where people are telling you, you know, everything's stacked against you, you'll never make it, you got to vote for this, or, you know, your life is wasted. And it is so evil to convince people that they don't have everything in them to make it, because they do.
Absolutely, Glenn. This is one of the most important foundations of our country. We were given our inalienable rights, not by government, not from government, but by God. And if that's the case, then we should never see ourselves as victims, but we should see ourselves as victors, because all things are possible in a country whose foundation is the Lord's. We haven't gotten it right. I'm not suggesting that we have, but I am suggesting that the closer we get to that more perfect union, the more likely we are in consistent harmony with the principles that undergird the society that come from the gospel.
You know, we never have gotten it right. And, you know, anybody who says America's a failure, never gotten it right, never lived up to its principles. Have you read those principles? I mean, those principles that all men are created equal, you know, and endowed by their creator, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Those principles are really, really, really super high. And
Absolutely.
I can't think of a grander mission statement than what our declaration lays out. And we don't cut ourselves any slack as human beings and say, look, we're going to mess it up, but you got to get back up and reapply yourself to the mission again.
Well, you should keep preaching that because that's exactly what the book of Proverbs reminds us, that a man falls 7 times, but a good man gets up the 7th time that he falls. It's the same thing that we hear from Jesus in the book of Matthew, that how many times should I be forgiven? 7 times? No, 70 times 7. It's exactly the same thing that we see in the midst of great challenges and frankly, even in my home state of South Carolina at the Mother Emanuel Church shooting. The believers of that church said to the killer, they said Matthew 5:44, you got to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. They said, I forgive you. Where does that come from? It comes from the recognition that we are all flawed humans. And as flawed humans, the most powerful thing we can do is to give it to the Lord. And when we do that, we see this light come out of us and form around us. That is what makes America in pursuit of this thing called perfection. We will always, always fall short. But ultimately, are you going to strive for mediocrity? Are you going to strive for average? Or do you want to get as close as possible to this notion that we are perfectible? Well, we're only perfectible on the other side. But until then, let us strive in the direction of perfection because we believe in absolute truth. We'll miss the mark, but I'm going to continue to fight tooth and nail to be all that I can be until I am entered into heaven through the glory of God.
I want to ask you something because we're talking about conviction, and you've been talking about religious conviction, but let me ask you about conviction to our own country. We had Congresswoman Ramirez. She was at a summit in Mexico City over the weekend. She's speaking in Spanish, and she says, I'm a proud Guatemalan before I'm an American. We've had Ilhan Omar say that she feels like she serves Somalia more than the United States. Can you be, an official of the United States and hold up the Constitution if you are not convicted that America is where your heart is, that's what comes first? You could say God comes first, and I get that. That's first citizenship. But if your first citizenship is in Somalia or Guatemala, how are you in the government of the United States? Should that be?
Well, Glenn, let's just be clear for all the listeners. Anyone who has taken the oath of office, who says that their allegiance is to another country, they have betrayed their oath of office and they should resign, period. Let me go a little further. Any American citizen who says that they are more beholden or more connected to their homeland that's not America, then they too are as lost as a goose in a rainstorm. The fact of the matter is, to be an American requires, in my heart and my deepest understanding, you have to acclimate to what it means to be an American. You cannot hold an allegiance to someplace else while saying that, I'm here because it's the greatest country on the planet. I'm going to celebrate home. The fact that you are here suggests that the most compassionate country on the planet has allowed you in, at least in response to our compassion and our love, at least assimilate to what it means to be an American, and then go a step further. Encourage everyone in your community to do the same. It is not okay to get here and be, to say that Somalia is where you're going to celebrate your real affection, or that you're somewhere in Mexico. That game has been played, and they all lose. We, the United States of America, an incredible melting pot of people, but we have one single culture, and it is defined at our inception. It is the unique place on the planet where we celebrate diversity, but not multiculturalism. I think they're very different. We have multiple cultures in our country, but unless they align under the banner, we can't survive. You have to be committed. And one of the things you'll read in One Nation Always Under God, available right now at Amazon.com or where books are sold, the one thing you'll figure out pretty quickly is we celebrate America. We don't celebrate any other country for one reason. We are the city on the hill. We are the greatest place on the planet to call home. And I believe we have an obligation, no, a responsibility to celebrate all the founding fathers who went before us and the ordinary people who stood up for this American ethos embedded in the gospel so as to move us towards being a more perfect union. It is a prerequisite for public service that you say with all of your heart, we are one nation under God and indivisible, period.
Senator Tim Scott, always great to talk to you, sir. Best of luck with the book. It's One Nation Always Under God. It is available now. One Nation Always Under God. It's great to have this as a reminder for your family, a reminder for yourself on who we really are and how God is woven into our DNA. Tim, thank you so much, Senator.